Why? Because this question is, in my opinion, the most powerful question you can ask yourself and others. Functioning in this world is based on several principles. One of them is the principle of causality. It says that every phenomenon has a cause, and every cause has an effect. The question is, why am I looking for that cause? This question was asked by great thinkers, often making breakthrough discoveries as a result of just finding the answer to why. There are other important questions, for example, how? But in my opinion, it is secondary to the question of why. In management, there is a method based on the power of this question. The method is called 5 times why. There is no need to orthodoxically stick to the number 5, because you can get a satisfactory answer the 2nd time or just as well the 6th time. The idea is to discover the real cause of the problem. For the sake of example, let's assume that the problem is technical and concerns, for example, a recurring malfunction in your car, specifically a noisy exhaust system. The method works as follows. We ask the first question, why does the exhaust make noise? The answer is that the end muffler dings the chassis. Why is the end muffler flapping against the chassis? Because the mounting bracket is broken. Why is the mounting bracket broken? Because the rubber vibration reducing element did not hold. Why didn't it hold? Because the stresses were too high. Why were the stresses too high? Because the end muffler was installed carelessly. This is an authentic example of asking the question why to get an answer to an annoying problem. This particular example could still be continued, and the question of why it was installed carelessly and so on could be asked. In the end, it turned out that the mechanic who did the muffler replacement had a muffler from another model that was 2 centimeters different in length and, despite the deflection during welding, did not fully compensate for the difference, causing the bracket to break off each time after a very short time after replacement and make noise. It will not always be the case that the answer you arrive at will be true. That is why it is so important to check the answer or verification. Especially if the assumptions we made when giving the answer were false, it is impossible to draw true conclusions. If the premises on which he concludes were false, this is the basis of logic. That is why it is so important to check the answer or verification. Especially if the assumptions we made when giving the answer were false, it is impossible to draw true conclusions. If the premises on which he concludes were false, this is the basis of logic. That is why it is so important to verify reality. Is it actually as you think it is? It can be said that by asking the question, why are you like a detective who seeks the truth? Sherlock Holmes, the hero of detective novels by Arthur Conan Doyle, used to say, when you eliminate everything that is impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Verifying reality is just such an elimination. The question is why. Asked in relation to external factors, i.e. those outside of you, eventually, after a series of eliminations of the impossible, it will lead to the discovery of the cause of the problem. Discovering the cause will allow you to protect yourself in the future from the consequences, that is, most likely, loss. This is the primary reason why you should ask this question as often as possible and then verify your conclusion. Remember that if you ask someone any question, there is a possibility that due to a conflict of interest, they may not give you a truthful answer. That's why it's so important that you, yourself, verify the words, because in this way you increase the stock of your knowledge. In the future, this will result in the fact that you no longer have to solve the same problem because you already know it. You know what the truth is and thus save time searching for it. A very good way to test someone's truthfulness is to ask a question to which you know the answer. If the interlocutor gives the wrong answer, it means one of two possibilities. Either he is wrong or he is lying. The power of this question is also revealed in the relationships in the episode about waking up. Do you know that when everything is going your way and it's pleasant, you won't ask questions, however? I encourage you to do so even when things are pleasant and there are no problems yet. I suggest you start right off the bat and ask yourself the following question: why are you in a relationship? Use the 5 times method. Why? Let me just hint that if you ask yourself this question, the first thing that comes to your mind will probably be true, no matter how ridiculous it may seem to you at first. Don't ignore such an answer, just look into it with further questions. You will be very surprised by what conclusions you can come to. If you do this exercise, please write in the comments whether the conclusions you reached were in line with your beliefs or whether you reached something you didn't expect to find. After this exercise, you will realize that very different causes are possible, which you are not even aware of, but which are somewhere in your subconscious. Why do I think this way? Why do I think this way? For what reason do I think exactly this way? Once you are proficient in using the why question in relation to yourself, I suggest that you start using it in relation to others. At first, you can ask directly. For example, you asked someone for a small favor. If you received a refusal, ask this person for reasons. For example, why you will not help. I sensitize you to the form of the question asked. There is a huge difference between asking why can't you help me and why won't you help me. The first question has an implicit assumption in it. The assumption is that the person cannot help you for objective reasons that lie outside of his or her power to do so. For example, when asked to help you move or transport you somewhere, someone will say they have a broken car or a broken leg. The question, why don't you want to help me? It is very direct. In this case, it assumes that there is no objective reason for the refusal because the reason is the person's unwillingness to help you. If you do such an experiment, you will find that 99% of people will perfectly grasp the premise of the second question and answer in a certain, even identical way. If you do this experiment, write in the comments what is the common denominator of the answers to the second question. It is enough for you to ask 10 to 15 people. This will already be a sufficient sample. When you notice one most common answer, then play with the question why. Try to answer the question yourself, why did they answer that way? When you do this, you will discover on your own the first of the patterns of human behavior. It can happen, and is even likely to happen, that by asking the second of the previously mentioned questions, you will catch someone in a lie. You will ask someone for a ride. You will receive an answer that it is not possible because they have a broken down car. Then on the same day or evening, you will see this person driving this supposedly broken down car, or you will see them while they declare that they are bedridden. The possibilities are many. Many years ago, I conducted the following experiment. Watching mainly a certain television, I noticed that they were attacking a certain radio station very strongly. So I decided to listen to the broadcasts of this radio station and came across an interesting series. The guest of one of the broadcasts was Mr. Professor. He was introduced as a specialist in his field. It just so happened that the topic of the broadcast was well known to me. Accordingly, I took the trouble to call into the broadcast, since the program's formula allowed it, and asked a question to which I knew the answer. The question was neither inelegant nor politically incorrect. It was as follows: why has Poland only expanded its GDP twice in the 30 years since 1989, and China 10 times? To my amazement, the professor began to wrench and answer like a politician. He praised me for a very good and valuable question, which betrays a lot of knowledge and orientation on the subject. And that he thinks that, in fact, he is very happy. Well, thank you. Lots of words, little substance as a result. He did not answer the question. This was a strong warning signal to me that something was wrong. Out of politeness, I assumed that the university professor nevertheless had a little more knowledge in this field than me, and yet he did not answer. So I asked the question why he didn't answer. He was a professor, and the question was quite simple. It would be rude to suspect that he didn't know. So the answer had to be that he didn't answer because he didn't want to. All right, but why didn't he want to answer? Because someone cared more about him not answering. Why did someone care that he didn't answer? Because he had no interest in doing so. That is, he must have had another interest. If the radio station declares that it is patriotic, why does it have an interest other than to make a correct diagnosis of the problem? Because it has no real interest in changing the status quo. The questions can be multiplied. I then came to the conclusion that everyone is sowing their own propaganda, presenting a picture of reality in a way that is consistent with their political line. That's why, watching the news programs of various TV stations, one can get the impression that they are reporting events from different perspectives, most often their own. As an aside to this example, I would only add that the greatest vigilance should be exercised when all TV, newspaper, or radio stations have the same narrative. This usually means that the propaganda campaign is coordinated at a higher level, higher than the editorial board of a particular station. To sum up, why? For what reason? These are synonyms for the phrase, whose primary task is to know the reasons for some action or some state of affairs. Knowing the cause makes it possible to predict the consequences in the future. It's science, science gives knowledge, and knowledge gives opportunities. It opens your eyes and saves you time. That's why you need to know when you ask the question, why you become harder to control and manipulate, and that automatically makes you stronger. The stronger you are, the less often you will be taken advantage of. Read, learn. Without this, you are weak. Today you have knowledge or you are controlled. And that's exactly the point.